Hey, thank you so much for joining us, and thanks for being a part of our online community. I'm Pastor Kyler. I'm the associate pastor here at Gold Creek, Woodinville, and we're so excited that you're with us. If you're new or newer or new-ish, we want to know that you're here, so let us know by texting Gold Creek to the number on the screen so that we can reach out to you. And if you're one of the people that contributes to Gold Creek, whether it's through your time or your finances, hey, we just want to say thank you. Thank you for being a part of Gold Creek Woodinville. If you want to start being a part of Gold Creek Woodinville by giving financially, then text GC Woodinville to the number on the screen. Thanks so much for joining us.
Resurrection song. This is my hallelujah come. This is why it's to you I run. This is my resurrection song. This is my hallelujah come. This is why it's to you I run. There's no space that is love.
Jonah, why did you try to run away? Did you think you could hide? How come you took off in the opposite direction? Why didn't you want to get up and go? Don't you know that you can't escape me, even in the depths of the sea? What took you so long to pray? Did you forget that I'm the only one who can save you? Don't you believe I'm the God of second chances? Jonah, is it right for you to be angry? Shouldn't I feel sorry for such a great city?
Hey, good morning, Gold Creek, Woodinville. Man, I'm excited. We are on set at an amazing spot. We're kicking off a brand new sermon series or collection of talks, however you want to say it. And it's all about the ocean. So it's very aptly timed that we are out at a beautiful spot on the ocean. And this series is called Big Fish. And what Big Fish is all about is just that, one big fish. And if you're joining us online today, I wanted to think about and ask you a question was, when was the last time you saw a big fish? And not like a fishing fish, but like a whale. Like when was that last time for you? The beautiful thing about being in Washington is we have the mountains, we have the rivers, we have the lakes, and we also have the ocean. It's an amazing deal. I mean, it is not a common occurrence for you to go out and see whales when you're out there. I've seen them over and over again when I'm fishing in the Sound, and people sometimes go their whole lives without ever seeing a whale in real life, and we have them literally in our backyard. I mean, it's amazing. I remember just a couple years ago, I was fishing out in the Puget Sound with some friends, and we had a pod of orcas come right up next to the boat, and you could count them out. You could see the fins. You could see the colors. I mean, it was unbelievable. We live in a beautiful place. In this series, Big Fish, I want to talk about a whale. I want to talk about the book of Jonah. And this book is in the Old Testament. And what's interesting about the book of Jonah is it shares a story that seems totally unrealistic. But what I love about it is that it is super practical and applicable for us today. Even though it was written thousands of years ago, it was written specifically for our time today. So I want to tell you just a little bit about Jonah. Jonah, and specifically this week, ran from God. And when I think about people in our time, our very specific space we're in right now, people run from God. People are scared. And Jonah, the thing about Jonah is Jonah had 1 foot in and 1 foot out of his faith kind of the whole time. He was in his faith when it was comfortable, but when his faith became uncomfortable, he wanted to step out. Another thing about Jonah, Jonah didn't like sharing his faith. He didn't want to share his faith. He was scared of sharing his faith. And Jonah also hated the Gentiles. Those were the people that he had to go share his faith with. And when I think about that, I think, oh man, all three of these things are very much like us. I think we are in a 1 foot in, 1 foot out moment. It's becoming harder and harder to have a faith. We have to really decide, are we going to have this, not just when it's good, but also, are we going to follow when it's bad? I think about Jonah that it was hard for him to share his faith. I mean, it's hard for us to share our faith, right? And then he hated the people that he had to reach. And I feel like right now, with this unique situation we're in, people politically hate each other. You hate Democrats, you hate Republicans, you hate people who wear masks, you hate people that don't, you hate people who stay home, you hate people that don't, right? We're so divided, and so it's so perfectly fit that even though the book of Jonah was written thousands of years ago, it was written for us today. So where we're going to be is today I want to just jump into chapter 1. Chapter 1 of the book of Jonah, it's all about a guy who has a meeting, a destiny with a big fish. It says this in chapter 1, verses 1 and 2. The Lord gave this message to Jonah, son of Amittai. Get up and go to the great city of Nineveh. Announce my judgment against it, because I have seen how wicked these people are. But Jonah got up, went to the opposite direction, away from the Lord. He went down to the port of Joppa, where he found a ship
leaving for Tarshish. And then it says that he bought a ticket, went on board, hoping to escape from the Lord by sailing to Tarshish. Now, what's interesting about Joppa and Nineveh, so God was calling Jonah to go to Nineveh. Nineveh is modern day Iraq. Nineveh or Iraq is dry, hot, and there's nothing there. I mean, if you're a veteran who's might have done a tour to Iraq, you could even expand on potentially how not fun Iraq is. Just the heat and the climate and everything. So this is where God was calling Jonah to go. Modern day Iraq, hot, dry. It's like a Las Vegas without the city. There's nothing there, just a desert. So what he does then, though, is go the opposite direction. He goes to Joppa. And what's interesting about Joppa, it's modern day Tel Aviv. If you're to go to Israel, you go to modern day Tel Aviv, and it's right on the Mediterranean Sea. And I've been to Tel Aviv when we were in Israel, and it's beautiful. Like there's no, I mean, it's very clear why he went to Tel Aviv or Joppa is because Tel Aviv today, it's right on the Mediterranean. It's cool, it's calm, it's beautiful. The water's perfect. And Tel Aviv in Israel is like the tech hub of the country. So it's very much even like Seattle. So it's so interesting that he gets called to go to this nowhere destination. He's like, nope, I'm going the other way because it's way nicer in Joppa. You know, then that scripture says that he bought a ticket, got on board, hoping to escape the Lord by sailing to Tarshish. And let's just all agree right now, you can't run and escape from God. And specifically, if you have a call on your life from God, as much as you may not want it, you can't get away from it. So what happens though is what we get in these places where we're in the storm and we want to run away from the storm. So I was thinking about moments in time when we run away from the storm, where God's calling us to do something, to be a better person, to do better things, and we run from them kind of like Jonah did. I think the first thing when you think about it is our faith. Maybe for you today, you're sitting there and the thought of sharing your faith right now, or even in the thought of sharing your faith in COVID, seems like an absurd idea. You know, you have all these excuses, man, I don't know what to say. I don't know how to expand on my faith. I don't know what people would think about me. What if I was bold in my job? What would happen with that? You know, you begin to get into the storm and think, no, I can't do that. And what happens is you become unhappy. You get stuck in your faith because you're not willing to jump to that next step. It's the storm. You're running from what God might be calling you to do. I think in our marriages, we're called to invest in our marriages. And one thing that I know about COVID, it has put a lot of stress on all of our marriages. And sometimes the best thing for us to do is to step up in our marriages and do the right thing and have those conversations. But what happens a lot of the times is we avoid and we run. Think about kids and parenting. You know, we're called to raise kids and be in their lives and helping them and loving them and trying to lead them. And I know I'm just as guilty sometimes when you're tired, you feel like you've had such a long day, you can't fight them, you just give them the iPad, right? Just dive into that. When what we should be doing in the middle of that storm, because long term we want our kids to be healthy, or I want to be a good parent, I need to step up. Then it comes to, I think, worry as well. The very act of worry right now, we've got our place with fear because of our culture and situation where a lot of us are paralyzed in fear. We're paralyzed in worry, and we can't do what God wants us to do because we don't even know how to get out of the house anymore. We don't even know what it would look like to have a regular conversation with somebody because we're so wrapped up in our fear. That's a storm in itself. And then even when it comes to, I was thinking another thing, generosity. I think people are so scared about finances today. And I understand because things are so up and down. But the funny thing about finances, the very thing we're afraid of is being generous. We don't have the margin or the capacity to be generous, is the very thing that frees us up from our fear of finances. I know for myself, when I chose to become, and my family to become a percentage givers, meaning I gave 10% to God before anything else. It's a faith step moment. And when I released that fear to God, all of a sudden, I don't have to live under the same fear that the money's not going to come, because the money has never come from me. It's always come from God. So could it be the very fact, the thing I'm running from, the thing I'm fearful of, is the very thing that I need in my life? So Jonah, right, back to the story, Jonah thinks he's escaped. Jumped on the boat. He's like, I'm leaving the world behind. There's nothing going on. It's blue skies. We're on the water. I can imagine that moment of peace that he thinks he has because he's running away. So let me pick it up in verse 4. God gives him a little surprise. But the Lord hurled a powerful wind over the sea, causing a violent storm that threatened to break the ship apart. Fearing for their lives, the desperate sailors shouted to their gods for help. Get up, he says, pray to your God. Maybe he'll pay attention to us and spare us our lives. Then the crew cast lots to see which one of them had offended the gods and caused the terrible storm. And when they did this, the lots identify Jonah as the culprit. So this super important moment. He's running from God. He's trying to place blame on everything else. He's trying to say, no, I'm not the right person. I don't have the right stuff. I just can't do it, God. Every excuse under the book, right? He's running. He's in the storm. He's getting away. And he finally has this moment where he says, it's my fault. It's my fault. I want you to repeat with me this little phrase. It's my fault. Say it one more time. It's my fault. You see, Jonah has this moment where he was fighting his calling. He was fighting the right thing to do. He was fighting the direction God was calling him to do the whole time. And he kept placing blame on everything except himself, pointing his fingers. Finally, he came to this point and he said this amazing thing. He says, it's my fault. And this is an important spot in the scripture. This is an important part in the story because real change doesn't happen until we begin to own our stuff. In fact, spiritual growth will not happen in your life. Spiritual growth won't happen in my life until I come to the place where I can say, it's my fault. It's time to change. And I think about it in terms of a mirror. Here we got a mirror, and you might see the other people in it. Now, the thing about mirrors, you look at it, you can see yourself. But what happens is when you're in a state when you're running away from God, when you're in a state when you're trying to make excuses and, my marriage is in shambles, my kids are going crazy, my faith is not where I want it, I'm so worried about money, we don't have enough money, you're making all these excuses. What you like to do is turn the mirror and say, look in the mirror, this is why my marriage is at fault, it's you, right? This is why my finances don't work, it's because all these other external things. This is why my kids are so crazy, look at them. It's not until you flip the mirror and you say, it's my fault, that you begin the process of real change. The hardest thing for us to do as human beings is to look ourselves in the mirror and say, it's my fault. But it's the very beginning of spiritual growth in our life. If you think about the very foundations of our faith, the foundation of our faith is standing before God and not pointing the mirror at Him and saying, God, look, this is why I didn't live up to what I was doing. No. The very foundation of our faith is turning the mirror in front of God and not making excuses and saying, Lord, I have sinned. I need forgiveness. Owning it in the moment and saying, Lord, I need you. I need you. And it's in that moment you can find real healing, real growth, and a path out of the storm. So that's what Jonah does. In chapter 1, verse 8, it says this, why is this awful storm coming down on us, they demanded. Who are you? What's your line of work? What country are you from? What's your nationality? So they have this moment where they're trying to figure out who he is because his story's not matching up how he's living his life. And I call this the gut check moment. When there's a crisis in our lives, when bad things happen, things are out of your control, Who are you? That's really when you are able to define for yourself who you are and where you go. When crisis hits, when the storms happen, when things aren't as they're meant to be, where do you go? Do you run away from God like Jonah? Or are you choosing to own it and run to God? It's the hardest thing to do. It's the hardest thing to do, but the best thing to do. And what happens is it's a moment, a gut check moment, where they're asking Jonah, like, who are you? Because this doesn't make sense. If you're a person of God, why is all this bad stuff happening? Well, it's because he wasn't doing what he said he was supposed to be doing. I think of the example, when I was in college, I played soccer in college. I played at a Christian college. And I always had a propensity of playing too aggressively, always trash talking. I just grown up, that's what I did in sports, whether it's good or bad. And there was a moment in time where I was playing this guy, like I always do, and I did what I always did, and I was probably playing a little too aggressive against this guy, and I was talking trash to him, trying to get in his mind. As part of the game, that was my excuse. And he turned to me and he said, hey, aren't you supposed to be a Christian? Because I'm at a Christian college playing soccer. And it was one of those moments where I had nothing to say. He was absolutely right. Like, if I am who I'm supposed to be, if I'm supposed to be a Christian, I'm not supposed to be living this way. And in the same way, how I live points to what I believe. If Jonah was living how he was supposed to be living, he was going to be going and following God. And I think when the pressure comes, like we're in right now with COVID, we can ask ourselves the question, are we living our lives and do our lives reflect what God's call is on our lives? And if it isn't, it's a good moment for the mirror, where you pull the mirror back up, and instead of making excuses, you look yourself in your mirror, you're like, it's my fault. I got to check myself. I need God's help through this process. So then it goes on and says this, Jonah answered. He said, I'm a Hebrew, and I worship the Lord, the God of heaven who made the sea and the land. He has this moment. I'm like, no, I am a Christian. And since the storm was getting worse all the time, they asked him, what should we do to stop this storm? Jonah says this, and this is crazy. Jonah has this moment. He owns it. He says, this is my fault. He says, throw me into the sea, and it will become calm again. But I can't say I would say the same thing if I was stuck in a storm, to say, throw me in the sea. And so it says, O Lord, you sent this storm upon him for your own good reasons. This is the other sailors saying this, kind of praying to God. Then the sailors picked up Jonah, threw him into the raging sea, and the storm stopped at once. I mean, that's crazy to think. But could it be the very thing that will calm our storm is the moment that we own our stuff? It is so easy to point the fingers at other people and other things and other situations, but in the moment when we own it, that's the moment that it calms our storm. So I want to land the plane. I want to ask you a question today. What needs to go overboard for you to calm your storm? Or even, I want to say it a different way. What do you need to own in your life and throw overboard? What is it that you know? And what I know, what I love about God, whether we're live, whether you're joining me online, is that God speaks to our heart in the moment exactly right now. And if you've asked God that question in your heart, I bet you He's speaking. What do you need to throw overboard for you to find some peace in your life? Maybe is it rebellion, right? The very fact that you've been trying to do life without God. You've been trying to run the opposite direction of God. And this is your moment. You're like, no, I can't fight. I can't continue to rebel. This is the moment where I got to give my life to God. I got to run toward God. Maybe you've been avoiding. You've been making every excuse. You've been the deflector. Every time somebody says that something is wrong, it's everybody else's fault. It's your family's fault. It's your kids' fault. It's the economy's fault. It's all these things. And there's this moment where you got to stop avoiding and own it. Say, it's my fault. Maybe it's pride. The very thought that you are the one who might be the one in control making these things happen, and you don't want to say it. Well, I'll tell you, when we stand before God, the one thing we can't do is not own it. The one thing that we can't do is stand in our pride and make an excuse. When we stand before God, all we can do is ask forgiveness. So maybe it's that. Or maybe it's fear. Maybe fear is the thing for you that has totally paralyzed you. That you are no longer even able to live your life the way you once wanted to live it because you're paralyzed in fear. Maybe that fear needs to be thrown overboard as well. You see, there's a day, there's a time when we gotta own it, and we gotta throw something out to calm the storm. We need to throw something into the water to calm the storm. I think sometimes we need a restart. The best thing to do from the very beginning is to own it and let go. I'm gonna calm my storm today.
Hey, thank you for being a part of our online community. If you want to stay up to date with everything that's going on, download our app or hop on our website and just make sure you follow all of our social media accounts so that you're in the loop. See you next time.